Scott Grayson is in Minnesota. He's been there all week long, and he joins us now to recap Super Bowl 52. They are landed. You are still there, but tons to talk about, Scott, as the final edition of Grayson's Grades are posted. And let's start at the top here with Nick Foles. I would have to assume he gets the A.
Yeah, absolutely. Who could have saw that coming, right? We were all talking all week out here. If he could even do anything remotely close to what he did in Minnesota, in the Minnesota game, then the Eagles have a chance, right? I mean, nobody saw him doing what he did. And, I'm out here with John, and you're going to talk to John later, and we've been talking, and it's kind of crazy to think that, he might have even played better than he did in the Minnesota game. He was throwing in some tight windows. He got a lot of help from his receivers, but a great game plan again by Doug Peterson, and he even caught a touchdown pass in a Super Bowl. I mean, what a crazy game and a crazy day that was.
Doug Peterson's got to be high on the list as well. I mean, fourth down, the play that they come up with. I mean, do you know the origin and the background of that play at all?
I know John got a lot more of that from Frank Reich after the game, but it's a crazy play where obviously the whole idea is just to create misconception and allow Nick Foles to slip out. I did talk to Brent Selleck about that play, and he had said that they've been running it for quite a while now in practice, but they've never actually gone to it. And he said they've never run it as well or as clean or as perfectly as they did there in the Super Bowl last night. So it needed perfection. It got perfection. It was extremely well executed. And the funny thing to me is when you look at the replay from the right angle, you see Burton throw the ball, and the ball's only halfway to Foles, and he's already raising both arms. He knows it's a touchdown. So great play call. Great, that's Doug Peterson. Totally aggressive. And one game that I remember he was not aggressive was Seattle. It ended up being a loss.
Alshon Jeffery, they signed him to the one-year deal. He ends up getting the extension. Now, his numbers didn't jump off the page this year. Some people have been critical that he didn't deserve that contract, that he's not a number one wide receiver. But last night, the impact that he brought to that game early, that's why you signed him. You gave him an A.
Yeah, he's there when you need him. That's what Alshon Jeffery was. And, the people who say that he didn't put up the numbers or he's not doing what they brought him there to do, no, he did what they brought him there to do, which is to also create distractions on the defense and to force them to have to play more and keep him accounted for. He did a great job last night of setting the tone early on, making some great catches. And you can't help but appreciate the job that Alshon Jeffery has done all season long, because he allowed everybody else on that receiving corps to go out and do what they did.
Scott Grayson's in Minnesota. The offensive line, you gave them an A as well, but I want to ask you about the emotion from Jason Kelce. You asked him that question that has been basically, that soundbite is all over the place today. We played it on our show. The NFL Network has it. I mean, it's everywhere. Did you expect to get that kind of raw emotion from Kelce?
No, because the way he walked in, he was all composed. He was good. He was Jason Kelce. Now, he will occasionally, one thing I like about Kelce is he always shoots you straight, usually. And, he's not going to BS you around the bush at all. But when, he totally let his guard down. He put down all the walls that were in the way, and he just said, here I am, this is me. And he let it pour out. It was remarkable to be standing there. You feel the emotion in the video or when you see it, but to have been standing there and hear him and see him pouring out that raw emotion, that was pure joy in front of you watching it unfold. This guy who's had this long journey, and he let it be known. He had no D1 scholarship offers, and here he is now a Super Bowl champion. It was remarkable. And the way that he weaved it all back to Rocky as well and got into that when he was talking about that line from the movie, you couldn't help but be happy for the guy for sure.
I said I think that Brandon Graham's strip sack might be the biggest play in the history of the franchise. I don't know if you got a chance to talk to Graham afterwards, but he's another guy. They wanted JPP. They wanted Earl Thomas. But it's apropos that the guy that nobody wanted has the biggest play maybe in the history of the franchise.
Yeah, and he was playing through, he said after the fact, he was playing through a little bit of a sore hamstring during that game as well. And in that moment, what you saw was a guy who was not going to be denied, right? He got initially blocked and just kept fighting through that and got there and was able to knock the ball away from Brady. Just a big-time play by a big-time player at a big time in the game when they needed it, and it certainly has to be considered one of the biggest plays in franchise history. You're right.
No. Not one of, Scott. That's the biggest play in the history of the franchise.
You can't argue that. I mean, it's just they got 9 quarterback hits on Brady, and they just couldn't get the sack, and when they needed it, they got it. It was just remarkable.
Scott, I know there are so many guys that you could talk about in terms of guys who weren't on this team a year ago but had an impact this year. LeGarrette Blount, Jay Ajayi, I mean, those guys all got A's. Alshon Jeffery we talked about. But how about Clement? I mean, the rap on this guy was he can't catch the ball out of the backfield. That's one of the reasons why he didn't get drafted. He makes a catch last night that really turned that game back brought the momentum back to Philly.
I mean, that's another one of those plays you could say is potentially one of the biggest plays in franchise history. But you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. Corey Clement, what he gave this team because of what he was able to evolve into out of the backfield as a receiver is unbelievable. And his best game ever as a receiver, obviously, was there at the end. He his speed, the change of pace is what drove teams nuts during the season out of the backfield. But when he did it through the air, that's just what really turned the game. And that's, you always talk about in the Super Bowl, what can you do that the other team may not expect? I don't think Bill Belichick thought Corey Clement would be a guy he had to worry about being a 100-yard receiver. And he went down there and got that amazing catch. They reviewed it. I know a lot of people in Philly were on pins and needles. It stood an amazing play by Corey Clement. That kid has come a long way in 1 year. And you couldn't be happier for him. I mean, he grew up in the shadows of Philadelphia, and now he sees a Super Bowl title in that town.
What was the scene in Minnesota like? We saw what the scene was like in Philly. I mean, it was outrageous. I know there was a lot of Eagles fans from my time out there. I wonder what the city looked like last night.
Yeah, they were partying. I thought it was interesting after coming up from doing player interviews and walking out of the stadium. There were a lot of Eagle fans still inside, and then security was starting to usher them out. But three Eagle fans had asked me to take their picture, and they were all holding cigars. So they brought their victory cigars to the game, and they lit them up right after they got outside of the stadium. I mean, it was truly a night to remember for a lot of them. And nothing here in Minneapolis to the extent that you saw back there in Philadelphia, but there were a lot of Eagle fans here. You saw them when you were here, Mike. I saw a ton of them walking around the concourse yesterday inside the stadium. Eagles chants breaking out everywhere. They celebrated down here at some parties in downtown Minneapolis, but obviously nothing like they did there in Philly.
I know Nick Foles, you wrote about it at 97.3ESPN.com. He said he's enjoying the moment. He's not worried about the future, but the Eagles now have a very interesting decision to make this offseason.
Well, here's the thing. If you're an Eagles fan, all of the power, if you will, is in the Eagles' hands. I mean, they don't have to do anything if they don't want to. So they can sit there and dangle them out there and keep trying to get more out of another team. And when it comes to taking advantage of teams, Howie Roseman is usually pretty good at finding a way to take advantage of somebody in a trade. And if he's able to trade Foles, he's not going to do it unless they get a lot in return for him. And look, the guy had 113.2 passer rating in the postseason, highest ever in the playoffs in NFL history. They certainly got ways to dangle Foles out there as a guy who another team might want. No, Foles isn't looking ahead to the future right now. At least he's not saying he is. He really is enjoying the moment. But the team is going to start looking ahead to the future, and I'm sure Howie's going to start fielding some calls on him here in the near future.
Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Check out the final edition of Grayson's Grades. Post it right now at 97.3ESPN.com, and all of Scott's coverage from Super Bowl 52. The Philadelphia Eagles are world champions. Thanks, Scott. Great season, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike.